Welcome to episode 2 of the 1994 podcast. I am Marcus Blake with That Nerd Show.
I'm Alex Moore, also with That Nerd Show.
And I'm Tristian Evans. I'm with Geek Vibes Nation.
All right, so we are back talking about more movies from 1994, and this time we've got a guest, Tristian Evans, also part of the North Texas Film Critics Association. As I have talked about, in the first episode, we're going to be inviting a lot of different film critics to talk about certain movies from 1994 with us. So episode 2, we decided to go big or talk about one of the big ones. In fact, you can call it the big one, Forrest Gump, because it's the movie that won Best Picture more than any, topped all the other movies, even though there might be of a debate that it shouldn't have won, but that's a topic for a different time. So anyway, thanks, Tristan, for joining us for this particular episode. You'll be with us for future episodes. Anyway, so we're going to jump right into it. Tristan, since you're the younger one among us, you were a child, so to speak, when this movie came out. When was the first time you saw Forrest Gump?
So yeah, I was like 5 when this movie came out, and I think I was probably like 6 or 7 when I first watched this movie. But my sister and I, this was like one of our treasured VHS tapes, so we wore this movie out growing up. I've always loved a movie about underdogs, and I always loved that Forrest Gump. He's like this very unassuming, very simple guy who's like
Yeah.
super influential to American history and all this stuff. So I just always really loved that story. And Tom Hanks was amazing in the film. So yeah, I always loved
I
it.
still I still maintain that's my theory is Forrest Gump really is a time traveler. And that's how he influenced history. That's the nerd in me. I know that's not really true, but it is kind of funny how he accidentally, kind of influenced things. Like he's the one that inspired Elvis to do the pelvic dance because Elvis stayed at the boarding house. I thought that was kind of like I always thought that was a little over the top, but at the same time, kind of cute. He seems to meet um how many presidents did he meet in that movie? Let's
At least
see.
three.
Yeah, Kennedy, Johnson.
JFK, Nixon, and Johnson. At
Yeah,
least those three.
Mhm.
yeah. So I mean, very influential. Yeah, I get what you're saying on that. Um, Now you talk about that this you guys probably wore out this VHS tape of yours and how you watched the movie. Did you watch it so many times that you had to splice the film back together in the VHS tape?
No, I guess we wore it out just short of that, thankfully. But yeah, we definitely watched it like at least once or twice a week. Like I'm serious. We watched it a lot.
All right, fair enough. So I'm going to start with you talking about characters in this movie. Who is your favorite character from Forrest Gump?
So, the Forrest for me, Forrest, of course, Lieutenant Dan, was right there in a close second. I always loved his like post-Vietnam War like angry phase. And as a kid, I just found any adult character that was always mad and angry and cussing entertaining. So yeah, Forrest is there, but Lieutenant Dan, close second.
Okay, all right. Lieutenant Dan's a good character. I think Gary Sinise should have won an award for that. And stuff. Alex, I'll turn it over to you. Who's your favorite character from Forrest Gump?
I think my favorite has always been Gary Sinise as Lieutenant Dan. I was unable to do the research, a little bit of research to see who actually won that year for supporting actor. I don't remember offhand, but a lot of great performances. But to me, his had the most depth and had the most variety, and it was to me the most interesting and the most dynamic because you see him as this fatalistic, straight-laced lieutenant who believes he's meant to die in battle because it's part of his family tradition, and then he doesn't, and he's angry and he's bitter and he's hostile, and yes, it's funny, but at the same time, kind of sad. And but then by the end of things, you see this total transformation. He's sort of had a rebirth, where by the end of it, you see a man who's very peaceful. He's very wealthy, of course, as well, but very peaceful and not that same angry individual. And he's sort of left everything behind him and gone on to a better life. So it's
Yeah.
great to see all that unfold at the very end.
Actually, and it's kind of funny to talk about that year. I mean, he was nominated for Best Supporting Actor, but lost out to Martin Landau from the Ed Wood movie. Of
Ugh.
all. Oh, no. We are talking about the Ed Wood movie down the line. It's a weird movie. It's kind of a cult favorite from 1994. Um, that is definitely on our list, and we'll definitely talk about Martin Landau's performance in that movie. But I don't know if Martin Landau really deserved it. I love Martin Landau as an actor. Um, but I kind of feel like Gary Sinise should have won that award, you know. But then again, I guess, the Academy Awards have always been filled with controversies. I'm sorry. I still maintain that the original Star Wars movie should have won Best Picture over Annie Hall, because fuck Woody Allen and Annie Hall. That's the nerd in me. But anyway, so I'm going to take a different route. My favorite character is Jenny. I love Winona Ryder. I'm not Winona Ryder, Robin Wright.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are you thinking of Little Women from that came
I
out?
know, right? I'm like, wow,
Oh.
that's an interesting Freudian slip. I love Robin Wright in this movie. Um, I thought she should have been nominated for an award. I think in a lot of ways, Jenny has the most tragic story. She had a rough childhood. She was, grew up poor white trash, or, they subtly hint that her father molested her and her siblings, and all she wants to do is get away. She's constantly running away. And when she comes back home, she comes to the one thing that has always been stable in her life, the love of her life, and that's Forrest. But she can't quite stay with him. She has every opportunity and just can't do it. But after all this wondering, all this tragedy, probably nearly overdosing multiple times, almost killing herself, she's dying of AIDS, and she does this one thing right. She has a child and gives him a better life than what she ever had. Um, so I think she is the most interesting character, because you get this ultimate duality of characters from that area. Forrest Gump, who just wanted a simple life, even though he was a part of all of this stuff and influential in history, um, and realizes that his world, despite all the places he's been, is right there in his hometown with the girl that he, has always loved. And Jenny is the one that wanted nothing to do with it and has much more of a tragic life. And you wonder, well, if you had just stayed, if you had found that one stable thing in your life, which is Forrest, would your life have been so tragic? So,
I just thought of
yeah,
something interesting that I think is, I don't know if it's deliberate or not, but it seems like it might be, about the theme of running, as you were mentioning. She's always running away from something. Forrest Gump is always running towards something, and then Gary Sinise's character, Lieutenant Dan, is his plan is to not run. He's the immobile one. He ends up in the wheelchair.
yeah.
So almost something symbolic about that, and you see how their lives are so different based on their motivation and what they do or don't do in their lives.
Hey, wow. Never
Right?
thought of it
I
that
never thought of
way.
that.
Yeah, now we're getting deep. This is like that college film course we all took. Like, wow, let's get deep in a discussion. Um, and there's actually no mind expanding drugs going on at this time. So anyway, wow, that is interesting. And that's also, she's always telling Forrest to run, uh, whereas, and she's kind of like that motivation, run towards something, but all he really wants to do is run towards her. And for her, it's if I take my own advice, I'm running away from everything. So there's kind of a certain irony there about her encouraging someone to go do something, whereas she does the complete opposite. And you see the kind of life that they live. You know, I mean, Forrest has a tragic life to a point. Seeing your best friend die, having to carry him out, after a gunfire, uh, trying to maintain that promise of we're gonna, go shrimping together, and he does it anyway. Um, but yeah, that's interesting. Wow, Alex dropping some deep discussion here about Forrest Gump. All right, um, so we're gonna get to some interesting facts about Forrest Gump. So there are a lot of like actors that kind of popped up in here, and of course, it was the first time that they really used old footage of like characters. Like, I mean, the when they show Dick Cavett and John Lennon, I mean, that's actually footage from that show. They just kind of insert Forrest Gump in there. This is one of my most interesting facts. If you listen closely to the dialogue coming out of John Lennon in that scene, it's all the lyrics from his song Imagine.
Right.
I
So,
go ahead.
so it's like Forrest Gump inspired Imagine also.
I know, right? Because really, he would have been on that show before he wrote Imagine. It's like, wow. And I had never noticed that watching the movie years before, but I went back and watched it a couple of weeks ago. I was like, that's the lyrics to the song Imagine. I mean, it works. Uh, Tristan, I'm going to come back to you. What do you feel like is the most interesting thing about Forrest Gump?
The most interesting thing about Forrest Gump, I know I've already said this, but like to me, it will always be how he just always just so happened to be somewhere was where somewhere significant or somewhere
Right.
where he was making it, where he was influencing major events. Um, yeah, that really is like that. That really is kind of my what I really love and what kind of always stood out to me. Um, yeah.
Just
Sorry,
being,
I thought I had more, but I was like, no.
no, that's it. That's it for you. Um, I kind of like the interesting details. Like, here's one. You talk about actors who pop up and stuff. Michael Jace, who not real well known, but he was popular on The Shield. He played the running back that they let out of prison in The Replacements. But this was one of Michael Jace's earliest roles. He plays the leader of the Black Panthers. Um, so you talk about actors who have a tragic end. This guy's in prison for killing his wife and serving 40 years. Will probably end up dying in prison with how old he is. I don't even think he's even eligible for parole for another 20 years, and he's like 62 or something.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, you had things like that where just sort of actors pop up. Another little interesting fun fact: the Elvis scene when Elvis is talking, that's not the actor who played Elvis. It's actually uncredited. It's actually Kurt Russell
Right.
voicing Elvis because he did that early Elvis movie for TV back in his career and made one hell of an Elvis Presley.
Right. I'm like, I've never seen that movie, but I can, when you said he was a voice, I was like, I could see him doing
Yeah,
that. So that is very
yeah.
cool.
That's also one of the reasons I like that movie 3000 Miles to Graceland. It's kind of a stupid movie, but just the fact that you get so many people want like Kurt Russell is Elvis, probably a casino and lives the life of Elvis after playing Elvis. You know. Anyway, Alex, I'm going to turn it over to you. What do you find is the most interesting thing about Forrest Gump?
Doing, I guess, is for the movie. One thing that I was thinking about earlier is that they, obviously had to delete some scenes out, and there was another moment in history that got taken out. Where I think if you look at the supplemental material on DVD or Blu-ray or whatever you have, there was actually a scene they filmed that where he uh, not intercedes, but I think it's a scene where Martin Luther King is walking through Alabama, and he ends up crossing paths with Martin Luther King, and they decided not to keep that in the movie. So they may have thought that that was trying, because a lot of those scenes are meant to be comedic, and maybe they just decided that that shouldn't be comedic, that it's a little too awkward, a little too weird for a character like that. But or maybe they just didn't have room for it. I don't know, but I remember
Well,
seeing a deleted scene where they did have an interaction with MLK, just like all these other big names in history.
you know, I don't know. I kind of feel like that fits because early on in the movie, you see him in the scene where they're James Meredith. They're trying to get him into school.
Well, maybe they felt it was too repetitive since there's already a scene where he interacts with I forgot the guy's name, but he was another figure from Alabama, I guess, who tried to block the black students from getting into the universities. So
Yeah. Well, wait a minute. Am I correct? James Meredith was the one, University of Mississippi, or is it the University of Alabama?
well, they were in Alabama, so I mean, I don't know, but they mentioned the names of the students in the movie. I don't know them offhand, but
I don't know. I gotta check. I gotta check. What I know, James
uh,
Meredith is the one, but I mean that's the era. I mean that's the time
mhm.
where it felt like Kennedy was squaring off with every redneck Southern state and
Mhm.
threatening to bring up, you know, the National Guard. Like, yeah, we're going to
Right.
get this, person into. Okay, so it's somebody different. Yeah, James Meredith was admitted to the University of Mississippi. Um,
It was a black woman in Alabama, and they mentioned
that's
her.
right.
I think there may have been two of them. I don't know, but
I gotta
they
look
mentioned
that.
the movie. But
And we're talking about that scene where she drops something and he,
yeah, and he's like, "Man,
Yeah,
you
he
dropped
picks it up like
the
yeah,
innocently.
yeah.
hood."
And I don't think that actress though, because we're trying to figure out who that actress. I don't think she was anybody, or we're talking about the actual figure, like the actual
Well, the
person.
figure that she's based on, you just see her from behind. So it's
Um,
but then
I'll-
they used actual footage of the politician who tried to stop her from entering the school.
yeah, it
So
was Governor Wallace.
Governor Wallace, George Wallace. Yeah, there's a reason why I forgot his name, but
Okay.
yeah.
That
Is it,
being said, I could have seen Forrest Gump at the Selma walk with Martin Luther King because like Forrest just always seemed to be on
Right.
the right side. I mean, Forrest wasn't racist. He wasn't raised to be that way by his mom, so he was just accepting of everybody. So
yeah,
I feel like they probably would have played it like he just so happened to stumble into it. But I could see him being like, "Oh, this is what are we marching for? Oh, well, my mom
yeah,
always told me not to be hateful, so hey, I'm gonna join you." Oh,
yeah, right.
I mean,
Um,
it's
got a little
possible
sorry,
there could be
got a little too
commentary
gestury.
about that from the director where he explains why they didn't use it, but
well, the first woman at the University of Alabama was authoring Lucy. That was in 1956. Maybe I don't know if the
I,
timeline actually lines up.
well,
Well, maybe I don't know. I got to go back, but it it was Governor Wallace who, his whole entire platform when he ran for president was segregation. It's like he had nothing else that he wanted to run on. He's just like segregation now, segregation forever, blah, 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 blah. And I always found it interesting too that, you deal with these characters. Well, screw the Supreme Court, what they say. We're just going to do our own thing because the Supreme Court doesn't rule over the United States or doesn't rule over us, states' rights first. And you're like, you do understand you're part of the federal government. You get federal money. They have the right to do this, and there's nothing you can do about it. Blah blah blah. Anyway, um, veering off into politics, which we don't really do. But that was really kind of a great scene. And of course, you've got to have Forrest Gump, there for the University of Alabama winning All-American. I do love the sign. They had to have the sign dropped and tell him to stop running.
It goes from stop Forrest stop to stop, run Forrest run to stop Forrest stop, basically.
All right.
No, yeah.
All right, we got to talk about one thing that that really kind of made this movie great: the soundtrack. I feel like this is probably the perfect soundtrack for a movie as you're kind of going through history, because they pick all these kind of iconic songs at certain moments, throughout history, and it's probably one of the best classic rock soundtracks ever. To boldly go where printing has never gone before. That's what we do at First Stop Print. From business cards to flyers, to signs and banners, to every kind of marketing material imaginable, we take care of all your printing needs. We have the best prices in the US, and we can beat any competitor, especially with our free shipping on every order. You get the best quality at the cheapest price. So what are you waiting for? Warp speed ahead. Contact First Stop Print today. Engage.
It received a double album when it came out. It was so extensive, and it was a big in the 90s.
I think I still have it on CD. And for you millennials out there, there was this little disc that we used to have that we had to put into a machine.
Wow, yeah, I think I read about those in history books in high school.
Some cars still have them. Oh my God. Yeah. I remember I did have it though. What was probably the best song from Forrest Gump? I'm gonna start with you, Tristan.
Oh, oh God. Heck, I don't want to sing. I don't know the name of it because I don't want to. And I know the history behind the song. It was a song that was like, "Stop, children, what's that sound?" It's like, and it's while he's in the
Buffalo Springfield. Forget the title of it, but it's the Vietnam song. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that one was apropos to what they were doing at the moment. So yeah, I like that one.
Okay. Alex, how about you?
Well, I'm going to cheat a little bit. Instead of picking one song, I'm going to pick sort of the montage where he's running across country and you're just hearing all these songs that have running in the title. And I know that seems a little obvious, but all the songs kind of fit the time period and they go really well with, the scenery that you're seeing. And so the editing and the way they chose the songs and cut all that together was really well done.
Well, if you look at the time frame of when he starts his running journey, kind of in the late 70s or whatever, Jackson Browne's Running on Empty, that's about the time it came out. That was on Jackson Browne's first kind of full album that catapulted him to stardom. Well, I mean, it's not his first hit. But it was kind of perfect for that moment.
You've got the Doobie Brothers, It Keeps You Running, and you've got Fleetwood Mac, You Can Go Your Own Way. I mean, there's
yeah. Which is kind of ironic that they would do that, because that song is not about running at all. It's literally a breakup song about a girl telling the guy, you can go your own way and do your own thing now. That's literally a breakup song between Lindsey Buckingham and the girl from Fleetwood Mac, whose name do what?
Stevie Nicks.
Stevie Nicks. Thank you. I can't believe I'm drawing a blank on that. But yeah, that was kind of a breakup song.
But in a way, that kind of fits too, because he did this. He did this after Jenny left him when they, had a sort of a romantic time together for however long it was. And
Ooh, look at Alex dropping more metaphors
Yes.
about this movie.
so
So, all right, I'm going to ask the obvious question. Is this? I mean, it's a great movie. So, I'll before I ask this question, let's get into this. Out of 1 through 10, I mean, Tristan, how would you grade this movie?
Hmm. I would give it. I'd give it an 8 out of 10.
All right,
Yeah, I rank it pretty high. I'd say 8 out of 10. And literally, only reason it's not 10 out of 10, there were just like little things that I wanted, like story wise. And these that's probably little nitpicks. Like I wanted to, because Jenny had sisters. There were things like that. Like I wish I could have seen her interact with her sister to see how different they turned out,
right.
or they were
Well,
similar.
kind
So
of
there's
what
little
happened to him.
exactly. They're never mentioned again. So it's like little things like that are why I would give it an 8 out of 10. But I mean, that's still pretty high. So yeah, 8 out of 10.
All right, Alex.
well, don't normally go this high, but to me, it's one of my personal favorites, and I think the fact that I guess nostalgia does play a factor, of course, but I still think that as far as movie quality goes and what you look for in a perfect movie, it's got everything. And
Okay.
just really quickly about the music, not just the rock soundtrack that's expansive, but the original music by Alan Silvestri, where he's got so many great themes that are so memorable throughout the movie. So the music plays such a large part, and it's not even just the rock music, it's the original music too. But to this day, when I rewatch it, it's a very draining, emotional film where you feel really tired at the end of it it's that involving. But I still have to rate it a 10 out of 10. I just think it
Wow.
was me it was the best movie of that year, and it still is. And
Alex already knows the question I'm going to ask because we've been talking about this, developing this podcast. And first of all, Tristan, you should know that there's maybe in the 10 years that Alex has been with that nerd show that we have known each other, that we are friends. I've known him to give a perfect 10 to maybe 4 movies.
Oh wow.
So I mean, it's like, oh, really? Okay. I'm going to be the curmudgeon on this one. I don't think it's a great movie. I give it a 7. I love the performances. I mean, I do love the soundtrack, but I think it's also a very predictable movie. I think you know how it's going to end. I think it's heavy on foreshadowing. Um, I I don't know if I felt that way when the first time I watched it in high school or the times I watched it when I was younger. But going back to it now, I think I have more film critic's eyes for that film. And there were just so many things I'm like, oh my God. You like, okay, I'll give you an example. The scene where Jenny is strung out and she nearly jumps. I mean, that's just obvious that she's not gonna. I mean, it's just heavy foreshadowing that she's not gonna survive this movie. There is no happy ending for her, so to speak. Well, I mean, I guess there kind of is, but you you know what's going to end up happening to Forrest. Okay, you know that they're going to get together in some way, and everything will be all right, and all that, but that she would die. Um, I always I when Lieutenant Dan shows up to be to honor his promise. Okay, that's the first step in him finding and recovering from his accident. That that he is going to change. That he's going to finally figure it out by the end of this movie. Okay, there's just nothing that surprises me in this film. It's beautiful, well acted, great soundtrack, but I'm like, I for the first 20 minutes, I know exactly what's going to happen. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think there are movies that are very predictable that um, work and you can enjoy. Kevin Smith, Zach, and Mary make a porno. You know exactly what's going to happen in that movie. You know that the two main characters are going to fall in love and it's going to be a love story while making a porn film. And, you know, after they have a huge fight, somehow Seth Rogen's character is going to realize that he was a moron and ends up professing his love and they get together. So what? But for me personally, I look at all the movies from 1994 and I'm like, to me, Forrest Gump is not the best one. It's nostalgic, it's fun, well acted, you know, great cast, but to me, there's not that wow factor to it. It's a feel good movie, but it doesn't really like inspire me, and it's not the best performance that Tom Hanks has ever given. You know, so that's just me personally.
It's one of them. You gotta admit, it's one of them.
Well, okay. I'm not disagreeing with that, but like I think his performance in Saving Private Ryan is way better. I think he should have won the Academy Award for Saving Private Ryan. Um, I think to me, I love his performance in The Terminal more than I like him as Forrest Gump. I felt like that was funny and down to earth and kind of inspiring. Him playing
Terminal is better than Forrest Gump?
do what?
You really think The Terminal is better than Forrest Gump?
I didn't say the movie. I said his performance.
But you said it was inspiring.
His character is inspiring. I mean, it's heartfelt. I think him playing Captain Sully is a better performance. In fact,
Wow.
I loved him
That
playing.
was a predictable movie, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, because you knew what was going to happen.
Right.
But here's one for you. He was up for the Academy Award for playing astronaut Jim Lovell in Apollo 13. I thought he should have actually won for that more than Forrest Gump. And I also admit that maybe my love for NASA, space, and science fiction and all that, and how he was uh, is better than playing someone who's mentally challenged but loves everybody and is so influential in history is better. I just like I said, that's just me with Forrest Gump, but I'm not taking away from it being one of the best movies of 1994 and that it still holds up today. So I already
I have
know
a
it.
question. I have
Yeah,
a
go
question
ahead.
about Ford. They said he was mentally disabled in the film, but like, wouldn't we? Uh, wouldn't we just say that he's? Like, how do I want to word this? I want to make sure I word this correctly. Like, didn't Forrest just seem autistic? Like, wouldn't we just call that autism? Like, not
Yes.
saying that that's a. I was like, it
He had
just
a low
back
IQ.
then.
People have an above average IQ usually. So
Well, I don't know. It's weird. I don't know. Um, would it be autism? Would it be Asperger's?
no,
That's
I think it's just, maybe it doesn't matter that much. Like, we don't know specifically that Jenny
Right.
died from AIDS. We just assume she did because of her lifestyle and when she died. And I think it's pretty obvious, but they don't come right out and say it. So they don't come right out and say exactly what's wrong with him. They just say that he's below average IQ. So, the
well,
name call, everything
yeah,
else.
but there's those things that when it comes to autism, I mean, his like attention span, what made him great at ping pong, what made him be able to, tear apart and put the rifle back together and break the, company record in the military. There's just little things that I think kind of lead to. I'm not saying he's Rain Man and he's going to be able to count cards, and all that, but
So he seemed to be athletically gifted or hand-eye coordination. That seemed to be his strength throughout the movie, his running ability and being able to use his hands, that sort of thing. But I mean, you can suspend reality a little bit with it being a movie and a novel and everything else. But to me, it was just a guy, mental retardation that just caused him to have a low IQ. So
Right.
But
So, Tristan, what about you? Do you feel like it, even 30 years later, looking at all the films from 1994, that it's still worthy of Best Picture?
I do. And I have some films from 1994 that I love, but like Forrest Gump was amazing. That was such a beautiful film. And like you were saying it didn't inspire you. I was like, how did that not inspire
No,
you?
I'm not.
Like,
Okay. I don't want to. I'm not saying it's not inspiring. I just, there are great and inspiring movies that, are worthy and all that. Okay, let's do this. Let me give you an example. Dead Poet Society. That's an inspiring movie, right?
yeah.
But is it predictable in the movie that Neil's going to kill himself? Isn't that a little bit shocking?
You know what
You
that
know,
is?
I think that's
I
a
mean,
subjective thing, though. I
right,
mean, there are probably people who could predict that he was going to kill himself.
right.
So
To me, inspiring is, Robert Williams becomes the greatest teacher in the world, and um, you know, ever while the students love him and all that, the faculty realize that times are changing. They're not so traditional. That would have been the more predictable route. But the fact that he inspires people to go off and do great things with his firing and moving on, I feel like that's more inspiring than Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump, if you look at the ultimate message, it's that there's one common thing. You love one another. You have love in your heart no matter what. If you do that, it is seen through friendship, the love of your life, caring for a child. That's what Forrest Gump had. He had the capacity to love no matter what. That's what made him not sea race after, despite growing up in Mississippi. Um, I don't know. Again, I don't want to sound like the curmudgeon of this podcast.
it's an unusual turn of events, roll
I know.
reversal.
To me, it just wasn't the best movie of 1994. It's one of the great ones, but there's so many other ones that I think are better storytelling, and that we're going to get to, down the line. But I don't want to take away from how well crafted this movie is, and that's one of the genius. That's the genius of Robert Zemeckis. Now, with that said, when you watch the Polar Express, do you not kind of have a tear in your eye by the end of the movie? And that's a very beautiful, kind of predictable, even though it's animated. And how do you not have a tear in your eye with Toy Story type thing? And I give that kind of a better
Or
performance.
Castaway, I guess, with the volleyball scene.
Castaway was one.
Oh, yeah.
Who doesn't I heard in CinemaSins, like this movie just made me cry over a volleyball. That deserves a I gotta take away some this.
I know. I I look at Tom Hanks as anytime it's like Daniel Day-Lewis. Anytime you do a movie, I know you're probably going to be up for an Academy Award or at least be talking about it. Even when you kind of play the villain. Remember that movie he did, The Circle, about the evil tech company that was spying on people type thing. He's kind of a mixture of Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, Zuckerberg. Um, I thought that was kind of interesting to see him kind of be a villain of sorts.
Well, there will be blood. I mean, Daniel Day-Lewis is totally a villain, but he's the protagonist, but he's a bad guy. So I mean,
Yeah. So Tom Hanks is like Daniel Day-Lewis. Anytime you do a movie, I'm just automatically know it's going to be. Larry Crown, the one that he does with Julia Roberts. That's kind of fun, predictable, and it's Tom Hanks at his best. I'm not saying he's going to win an award for it, but but then again, um, where he played Congressman Charlie Wilson,
mhm.
that's another great performance, and I found that performance a little bit more. I don't, I I feel like I'm just being a critic here that's just shitting all over Forrest Gump. Like, how do you not think that's his best performance? Like,
Yeah.
sorry.
Well, I think some of this has to do with looking at it through a different filter because we're looking back on it and after all these other performances, and it's hard to put ourselves in 1994 because I wasn't watching the Oscars at that point, and so I
Right.
don't remember what it was like watching everything up to then and since then because I wasn't seeing it in that specific moment the way that we see movies now. So to me, it doesn't matter if a movie is predictable or not. To me, it matters if you connect with the characters and you
Yeah.
took away something positive from the movie. And I think a lot of times when a movie is predictable, it's because somebody is not um, totally invested and they're distracted or they're bored, and so they're trying too hard to figure out what's going to happen, and so they're not really in the movie. They're just trying to figure it out. And
Yeah.
I ever since the movie Sixth Sense, people do that whenever they go to the movie, trying to figure out what that twist is going to be or how it's going to end. I go out with people or I'll watch a movie with somebody and I'd be like, just watch. Don't try to figure it out. Just watch because that's what you're here to do. So
Well, and that's kind of hard as critics too, because I mean, there's that part where we just kind of really enjoy the movie,
mm,
but then we kind of have to be harsh and call it out for what it is. I make no apologies about Killers of the Flower Moon, which came out last year. I still think that's a horrible movie and way too long. I do. I think you spent 3.5 hours telling what 90 minutes could have been. Hi, we're white men. We can't steal your land, but somehow we're going to steal your oil rights, therefore stealing your land with Native Americans. I mean, I didn't need 3 hours to tell that story. But I can also look at Argyle, which, we saw last week, and that movie's predictable and stupid and whatever, but it was hilarious. It just, you know, it it entertained more than anything else. And the satire over all the tropes and romantic action thrillers were great. Um, and I can enjoy a movie for what it is, but I know we're not going to be talking about that movie during award season.
and I think that's where some. I mean, I'm sorry to bring up Roger Ebert again. Well, I like.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's appropriate here. He mentioned in a review I read years ago that you have to sometimes, like you're saying, is like these are very different kinds of movies. You're not necessarily going to talk about them in the same breath because they're not
Right.
the same breath, but for what they are, that's kind of what you rate them as. And I think there's certainly a lot of I think there's something to that. So I wouldn't watch Forrest Gump and compare it to a movie like Clerks. They're completely different movies.
Yeah.
So you judge Clerks for the kind of movie it is, and you judge Forrest Gump for the kind of movie it is. And to me, at the end of the day, for what they are, Forrest Gump is better than
Right.
Clerks, and as much as I like Clerks. So
Well, I'm going to throw some more fuel on the fire because this was a debate between Alex and I. And Tristan, you can be the referee and then be the deciding vote. I thought Clerks was more well written than Forrest Gump. I really do. Still today. You're looking at me, and that's fine.
I mean, it's an indie dialogue heavy film versus a drama that has a lot of action, and it's a 2.5 hour movie versus a I don't know 90-minute movie. I mean, it's
My reasoning for it is there's something beautiful about these young downtrodden characters trying to get through the day of dealing with idiots, customers, their love life, and the fact that while it was accidental or it had to do with their budget, that they shot it in black and white, which is a great metaphor for the mundaneness of your life when you're working at a convenience store. As we talked about in the last episode, Dante and Randall are the dual nature of our personalities. We are probably more like Dante, where we play it safe and we do everything right, but we want to be Randall. And I think Kevin Smith captured perfectly, early 90s counterculture, those people. It's kind of a coming of age story. There's a lot more going on in that movie that you realize. And I don't think it is so predictable um, by the time you get to the end. Because who sees in that
Well,
movie?
and I don't know, what is there really to predict? I mean, it's
Did you
it's
did you
character.
see the fact that there was going to be a dead guy in the bathroom and the girl he's trying to get back with accidentally screwed the dead guy, which I know. I
I'll go back to my original point. I don't think that matters so much if you saw that coming or not. I just
that's
that
just
does,
my personal opinion as a critic. I just think it's better written. Forrest Gump is a much bigger movie
I mean,
because of this guy over the course of 20-25 years.
did you
For,
know that? Did you know that Lieutenant Dan was going to show up to the wedding with a haircut and a fiance who was Korean and or Asian and metal legs? I didn't.
Right.
did I know that he would
Did you
probably
predict that, Marcus?
that he would get his life together and probably show up to the
Oh,
wedding? I
that's
didn't know he would have
a
metal
broad,
legs, but I
broad.
mean,
So you're making a weird. That's a broad comparison because one is very kind of a broad thing, and the other is very
how do you
specific.
not predict with Lieutenant Dan that when he finally apologizes or thanks Forrest for saving his life on the boat, that's the moment his character turns and starts to get it right. That's his road to recovery. You can also, again, my original point that it's when he shows up to fulfill his promise, he's there, but he finally makes peace with himself. Like, of course, he's going to show up at the end. Once you cross that moment, I just think there's little things that Kevin Smith wrote that were so ridiculous that also kind of makes sense in that weird world. That's why I think it's better written. And here's the other thing. We have more in common as people with the characters from Clerks than we would with people from Forrest Gump. That's another thing. But that's just, again, that's my opinion. I mean, they're still very wonderful movies. They've stood the test of time, and that's why we're talking about them 30 years later.
Marcus, do me a favor. Just say you hate Forrest Gump. I just need you to admit it for me
I
before we
don't
leave this
Forrest
podcast.
Gump. Oh my God.
Just
You
say you
can't.
hate the movie. Just say it. Like
Don't
Yes.
hate
tell
the
the
movie.
truth.
I do like the movie. I just don't. I'm not jumping on the bandwagon that it's as good as everybody thinks it is.
No, most people don't think it's as good as it is. That's the thing. Everybody's gone a different direction. I'm the one who's sticking by it right now. So
I know. I
people
think.
have gotten sentimental about other movies and they've gotten away from Forrest Gump. I think that's
Hey,
just time.
here's one that we're going to talk about. You talk about being sentimental about movies. I have watched Airheads, which we're going to talk about in this podcast throughout the year multiple times. And that movie still, every time, cracks me up to the point that as stupid as it is, it's still fucking hilarious and gets me every time. So what can I say? I'm weird. Anyway, we're going to close out this episode talking about Forrest Gump. Again, we'd love to know how an audience thinks about it. Tell us how you would grade this movie. Is it still 30 years later worthy of Best Picture from that year? When we had movies like Pulp Fiction and Shawshank Redemption and movies that we don't even really talk about that much, like Immortal Love, great Gary Oldman film where he plays Beethoven, Bullets Over Broadway. Judi Dench won an Oscar for that one. I already know Alex is like, oh God, we got to talk about the Ed Wood movie.
Okay, we're going to talk about movies worse than Ed Wood too, and one of them I actually like. So there you go.
That's another thing too. Is some of these movies that were rated bad, we're taking another look and like, is it really this bad? And in fact, in our very next episode, it wasn't rated very high, but we're going to talk about it because we've gone back to watch it, and it's kind of a fun, little nostalgic movie. All right, everybody. Tristian, thanks for joining us for talking about Forrest Gump. The debate will continue. I will say this on my final thoughts. it is 30 years later. It's still great to go back and watch it and still enjoy it, even if you're like me, you don't think it's as good as it is, it once was, or you're like Alex and you're like, no, the nostalgia's still there, still a perfect 10. Or you're like Tristan, like, no, it's good, but it's not perfect. All right. We're going to close this out. We'll be back for another episode talking about another movie from 1994. But thanks for tuning in. And again, tweet us out at That Nerd Show and let us know your thoughts about Forrest Gump. All right. Say goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye bye.